Hi folks, today we are in an undisclosed location to talk about what that little guy just did right there. It's the annual salmon run where the salmon work their way upstream, completely exhausting themselves in an effort to get back to their natal streams and rivers. These guys have been working hard for a very, very long time, working their way up from the ocean. So enjoy some footage of them hanging out, exerting themselves, because they really are beautiful and magnificent creatures.
This video is going to be kind of a relaxing one. I'm just going to talk about salmon and interject here and there. So if you're looking for a quick fact sheet about salmon, this is not your video. But if you want to learn about them and relax a little bit with some soothing water videos, then feel free to stay tuned. We're going to be talking about the Kokanee salmon today, which is different than the salmon that we normally see. The salmon we normally see in photos and videos and drawings is the sockeye salmon. The sockeye salmon is kind of the classical example. The sockeye salmon is anadromous, meaning that it makes its way from the ocean back into fresh water and then goes to its natal ground, meaning its birthing ground. And the sockeye salmon does this, and it seems like kind of a superhero species that can survive in both freshwater and saltwater, but that's actually not the case. Sockeye salmon suffer quite a bit, and their physical health begins to degrade once they enter freshwater. Their flesh starts falling off, and in fact, during this entire migration period, they do not eat at all. So as soon as they enter the freshwater, it's pretty much just the end of the game. It's the last stage in their life cycle as they go upstream to give birth once more. But we are really here to talk about the Kokanee salmon, which is the non-anadromous cousin of the sockeye. There's a couple names for the kokanee, also called kokanee trout, the silver trout, the Kokanee salmon, Kennerly's trout, walla, little redfish, and quite a few others. But unlike the sockeye, it actually spends its entire life in freshwater. This is a pretty common misconception that you'll see. I've even seen fishing signs that talk about the Kokanee salmon coming up from the ocean into its native ground. It's easy to mix up and completely understandable, but now you know the difference, that the Kokanee salmon, the red one, spends its entire life in freshwater. The specific species here get a little confusing, and there are some factors that suggest speciation. When the sockeye salmon return to the freshwater in the fall to spawn once more, sometimes they do mate with the Kokanee salmon and sometimes they don't. So we're not really sure why that exactly happens. Biologists believe that both species, the sockeye and the Kokanee salmon, were originally one species about 15,000 years ago, right before the ice melt. And it's commonly believed that this ice melt caused all of these lakes and rivers in the western United States to form. And this is believed to be the same time period that the species diverged. And we have a new example here, and this is probably a vocabulary word for you, of sympatric speciation. And that means when there is one species and there's a divergence, which results in the creation of a new species, but they still both inhabit the same geographical region. That's exactly what we see with the sockeye and kokanee. They are living in the same area, and this is, of course, only in the freshwater because the sockeye can go into freshwater. They do in the fall. However, the kokanee never go into the ocean, so this sympatric speciation geographic example is specific to these freshwater lakes and streams. And if you look carefully in some of these clips, you might be able to see some silver fish going by, and those are most likely the sockeye salmon that you're seeing, and not the kokanee, which sport that bright orange coat. Thus the name little red fish. In the early days of Manifest Destiny, the Kokanee salmon was hunted to near extinction inside of the United States. And for that reason, conservation efforts are very strong. In fact, while I was filming this video, I was stopped by a ranger, and he asked me if I was fishing, and I had to show him that I had no fishing equipment with me. And I actually had my Halloween skeleton in the back of the car, and when I opened it up to show him, he said, "You know there's a dead guy back here, right?" So that was fun. But anyway, my point is that these species are very, very protected, and they have special DNR rangers on duty at all times during salmon spawn season in order to catch people that are trying to catch the salmon and remove them from the lakes and streams. And this also goes hand in hand with some introduction and reintroduction efforts. There are no specified artificial breeding grounds for either species of salmon. However, there were in the past breeding efforts that actually captured the fresh salmon and put them into other places that they did not currently inhabit. And we see this throughout the Dakotas and especially the eastern United States. The kokanee and sockeye both were taken from the western United States and brought to the eastern states and introduced there in the autumn. However, much of these efforts failed, as I'm sure you can imagine. All throughout the United States and Canada, the Kokanee salmon is listed on the Endangered Species Act. Where we are particularly right now, it's listed as endangered, but there are many parts of the United States where the Kokanee salmon is listed as threatened and critically endangered. In Lowland National Park and Reserve in Canada, there was a huge crash of Kokanee salmon in the mid to late 2000s. They went from over 2,800 fish to less than 90 fish in the course of 1 year. And we still do not know why this happened. But nowadays, in the same park, they're up to some pretty good numbers, around 4,000, which is on its way up. It's not quite where it could be, but it's still going up, which is a good thing, I think.